You are live! It's alive! It's alive! Hello, friends and family. I am feeling super silly this morning. This beautiful Saturday morning. Welcome to another live coffee and conversation. Very big coffee and conversation here on the If You Could See Me Facebook page. My name is Erin Mahone. I am thrilled and excited to be joined this morning by one of our If You Could See Me family members from way back, Miss Tammy Ozolins. Tammy, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
Hello, happy Saturday.
Yes.
So, before we jump into all the things, we were just talking before we went live. How are you? You are a teacher. You are
Yes.
returning to in-person school now for the last, month, I guess, or a few weeks. How is it? Are you okay?
I'm okay.
Should we send provisions?
No, I don't drink coffee. But if I
Oh,
did, I'd probably be drinking a lot. It's exhausting. And I'm sure any other educator out there would probably agree with me. But I always say the rewards outweigh
yeah.
everything in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a veteran at this, I would say. I mean, I've been doing it now for 18 years, so I would classify myself as a veteran.
Agreed.
But even veteran teachers are just exhausted. Plus, I coach on top of it. So there's just a lot, like I was telling you earlier, there's so a lot more on our plates than there ever has been.
Mm-hmm.
And I never went into teaching for the money because, like I said, the rewards you get from the kids, like, for example, I work a part-time job and I do a little security. So I was working one of the local high school football games last night. And it actually is the high school that feeds in from my middle school.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just to see the other kids from high school there, just remembering me, hugging me, just saying, hey, and even the middle schoolers coming. That's where the reward comes in. So it's exhausting, but there's a lot more we have to do. I was telling you, I teach health and PE. So the tracing is the most important part. So you have to know where everybody is. So when I put them in teams, now I have to make a roster. And it's like, if I have 8 teams, I got to make 8 rosters, but then I teach 3 classes a day. So it's a lot.
Yeah.
But again, it's just seeing the kids. I know every teacher was just like, even though it's exhausting, it's so wonderful to see our colleagues and to see those kids in person. It really does outweigh the stress.
Yeah.
But lots of chocolate helps.
That's good. I mean, if you can't have coffee, or if you don't have coffee, then chocolate is definitely a good substitute. I think it's interesting. I'm a big fan of dialectical behavior therapy, DBTs, as many people know, and but one of the things that I love most about it is the dialectic, the both and concept, the idea that one thing can be true and another thing can also be true that is converse, or on the other side of that. And so it is true that it can be hard, like exceedingly hard, and good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Good to be back, happy to be back. Like, one doesn't have to negate the other. It's just a matter of, like, how do we hold space for what's hard without throwing out all the other things that are meaningful. So
Exactly.
that's what I took from what you said.
Oh yeah. Like and I think we're not even a full month yet. I think after a month in, it's just normal with teaching. Again, being a veteran, even the first month without all of these restrictions is tough.
Challenging. Mm-hmm.
But now, after the first month, you start to get used to everything. Because, with teachers, I'm sure they know as well. Like, for example, the one day I got 3 new students added. So now you have to go back and redo all the seating charts, go back and reprint them. So that's where all the stress comes in. But I think after a month, definitely 2 months, things are back in the flow. I don't feel as stressed, which is nice. It's just always the first month. And like I said, on top of coaching, my time is very limited. So
right. Exactly. So you just have to be really sort of frugal or economical with how much time you spend on any given task. And there are only so many hours in the day.
Oh, yes, yes. And this is where it tests my mental health too. This is where my coping skills come really into play, because then I have to be like, for example, this is my last year of coaching. I'm completely done. Like, I've
Whoa.
realized I need a break. I need time more for myself, for me
Mhm.
mentally, for me physically. So going to my toolbox, I made that decision.
Mhm.
And I know it's going to be the right decision, but yeah.
Wow. Okay, well, actually that is a beautiful segue into, the topic of today, which, is myths of bipolar, which, you live with very, effectively, successfully. You are kind of an expert slash model for, living actively in your recovery and really, working it. And then, that leads into the other half of this, which was, how to be successful with the mental health condition. And
Mhm.
so talk to us about sort of like the real time experience of having, we've come through this pandemic now. I mean, we're reintegrating into the world. It's not over, but obviously like life, we have to learn how to navigate the moment. Um, and, so like you got through the last 18 months, now we're integrating back into school. The stress is higher, the time is less, the demand is more significant, like how are you managing it all?
I imagine it, pretty good. The funny part for me is everybody, anybody that's diagnosed with bipolar, I think there's one of the big myths to me is people always think bipolar is just highs and lows,
Right.
and everyone's stuck in that same, I guess, context of, hey, they get highs, they get lows, and that's
Right.
false.
Hmm.
Like my highs might be completely different than somebody else's.
Right.
I think some people think, well, when you're manic, you sit there and you have all this energy. Well, my mania varies. I do have like a lot of energy, but sometimes my mania could come across as extreme irritability.
Right.
Like, I could get mad at the simplest things.
Hmm.
And it could be because I'm dealing with a mania episode.
Hmm.
So that's number one thing about the misses. Bipolar is just not one. I don't know what the word I'm looking for. You're better with words than I am, but it's just not one definition.
Right.
There's various
It's
definitions
not a
to it.
monolith like anything else. It's, there's a lot of individual experience. I think one of the things that we hear a lot, and we hear this described for autism, but I think it is relevant in many different sort of whatever you want to say, diagnoses or lived experiences. And that is, if you've met one person with the thing, whatever that thing is, you've met one person with that thing. And so there can be similarities, there can be but again, it's a spectrum, and different people have different experiences. And and that's why it's important for us to talk about it, right? Because then people understand, oh, it's not about, that movie definition of what a mental health diagnosis is or other diagnosis is. It's that plus whatever that individual's experience is.
Exactly, exactly. And for me, over the summer, like perfect example, over the summer, like I have to have structure. That's definitely one of my tools is structure. And it is great to have the summers off for teaching. It really is.
Right.
Don't get me wrong. However, after probably the second or third week,
Yeah.
I actually start to sometimes experience some swings
Hmm.
because there is no structure. I have all this time open
Hmm.
and it's not filled. And then what happens, I start to get these obsessive thoughts
Hmm.
and these thoughts that are so far in the future, or I just get lazy, as people, as I would call it, not as people,
Hmm.
as I would call it, lazy, but I'm
Hmm.
just not being lazy. I just can't get up to do it
Hmm.
because I'm struggling because I don't know what to do first.
Right.
So for me, like I work another part-time job, and people will say you work too much, but what people don't understand is I have to, because it
Right.
keeps me structured. But at the same time, I know when my limit is. So like I said, I knew coaching, this was it. That was my limit for this year. I'm not doing it anymore. Now I'll keep my other part-time job because I can structure those hours. but that's what I need to be successful is structure. That's definitely one toolbox, little tool that I use.
Well, you said people tell you that you work too hard or too much. And I struggle with other people commenting on like how we best manage, individual people best manage their lives, It's so much judgment goes into, oh, well, if only you would do A, B, and C, then, this wouldn't be your experience anymore, as opposed to just saying, oh, Tammy, I think it's so great that you have found stuff that works for you and that you understand what you need to be healthy and successful. That's so fantastic. So because it also puts you in a position, and anybody who kind of is open about this, which is so fantastic, it puts you in a position to feel like you have to explain yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And to have to say, well, but this is what works for me. And I appreciate your concern, but I know. And it becomes this like cycle of constantly having to justify your decisions.
Yes, and that's what I do tell them. Because I'm very open about
Yes, you are.
managing and coping with bipolar, and especially in the education field,
Mm-hmm.
especially now more than
Right,
ever.
exactly.
I want my students or any student to look up and be like, wow, that's fantastic. She's very open. Look how she's managing it. I'm not perfect by any means. I do still have mood swings. It's part of the disorder.
Mm-hmm.
But I am such a firm believer in educating, and I agree. I shouldn't have to justify myself every time. But the way I look at it is a way of educating people too. So
Right.
I look at them and I say, yes, I do. But do you understand the reason why I work is because it helps me with structure? Then they take that step back because they know me, or
Mm-hmm.
the ones that don't, it's nice because I educate them. But
Right.
the ones that do know me, they're like, oh, that does make sense. I didn't realize that. So I always take those opportunities as just a way to educate people.
And what are some of the other, I guess, myths that you describe or that you come in contact with that people, anytime, what are assumptions, I guess, that people make about you, about your experience that you'd
Pretty
like to
much
bust
that,
right here?
yeah, that I'm very moody.
I gotcha.
And they're like, well, why are you being so moody? You're just so, like I said, if I'm irritable, and I one of my biggest frustrations, and I hope, again, I'm not out to disrespect anybody because I'm not like that, Erin.
Mm-mm.
But I just want to give people advice. If for me, for example, I'll just speak on my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
If I said to you, Erin, hey, Erin, I'm having, a rough day today. Just, you got to leave me alone.
Mm-hmm.
I have said that to people. And
Mm-hmm.
the first thing they say to me is, well, then stop being so crabby. But they don't realize I'm using it as a mechanism, a tool. Like, I'm telling you, I need my space. So
Right.
I'm giving you that option. Please give me my space. And the first thing they say to me is stop being so crabby, or they'll be like, stop being, grouchy or other words. And I'm like, I'm trying to give you the hint. I need time to myself. So that's the frustration for me. It's like, I feel like if someone's telling you, hey, I need my space, please give the person that space.
Right.
Because
Without
sometimes
judgment.
I don't want to tell people, hey, I'm kind of swinging right now. That
Right.
This is my way of saying this, this is my coping mechanism,
Mm.
So that to me is like a myth that just because I'm having an off day doesn't mean I'm being rude, doesn't mean I'm, being a jerk. It just means I'm having an off day.
Mm-hmm.
And probably one of the biggest myths that I've seen and heard is, I'm crazy. I hate that term so much. I don't know why people seem to use that term.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Tammy. You know what? You take it or you leave it.
Right.
I have lost friends because of my disorder. But looking back now, I'm like, it's a shame because I didn't know about it back then. I wasn't diagnosed to my mid-20s. And who knows at that age? You're still developing. People, I don't think, realize, I know you're still an adult, but sometimes you're still developing.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know much about mental health back then at all.
Right. Right.
It wasn't very open. People didn't talk about it a lot. So no, I'm not crazy. So please stop using that term.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Tammy, and I wish people would look at people that way and not use that term.
Right. The whole person.
Mm-hmm.
Not, not just a diagnosis or a bad day. Please do not define me by my worst day, because there are thousands of other days that, also should be reflected upon. One of the things that you just said that I think is really important to highlight, Tammy, is this, like you being conscious of a bad day, right? Like I notice that I'm not my best today. And in an effort to protect you people in my life from what is not my best, what comes out when I'm not at my best, I'm telling you what I need and what you would benefit from. And so you're effectively advocating for yourself. You're effectively communicating what is needed in this situation. And in those situations where somebody says, well, just stop being grumpy or, moody or crazy or whatever, awful words they want to use, that is a sort of direct dismissal of your attempt to do exactly what they're asking for, which is communicate with me, let me know what's happening so that I know how to interact with you at any given moment. And I think we're all moving so fast that it's often very difficult to notice when a person is trying to communicate what their needs are, when they are trying to advocate for themselves, when they are trying to effectively do the thing that we're always constantly telling people to do, right? Learn to advocate for yourself. Do you know as a therapist how many times a day I have that conversation? Okay, so let me help you learn to advocate for yourself so that the people in your life know what you need and you can feel better supported. It's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we would all, as, humans, anybody listening to this, I encourage people to be aware of the times in their life where a person is trying to ask for what they need and you dismiss it, or you don't listen, or you immediately jump to judgment, telling them they should just be different. Well, you know what? I wish my eyes were green, but they're brown, and I can't change that, right? I can't change the color of my eyes.
Right.
I can't change the fact that, my mental health gets in the way sometimes of me being my very best. And, when I'm trying to communicate with that to you, listen, just listen, right? Just like listen.
Yes, for sure. And I mean, you're right. I am so well, I guess I would call myself a fine older machine in the sense that since I know my body so well, like you said, I can wake up that day and say, whew, is this going to be a good day? Or is this going to be a day where I'm going to have to go right in that toolbox and start working?
Right.
As soon as my feet hit that floor, I can tell. And that's why, like I said, if I know it's an off day, like you said, I try to advocate for myself. It just doesn't always work, unfortunately. But like you said it best, if somebody's advocating for him or herself, listen. And I think I don't think it comes out of meanness.
No.
I think it comes out of caring. I know oftentimes this before I educated my family about living and managing with bipolar, it was the fear that they had, like the fear of, are they going to say the wrong thing? Are they doing enough? I just care for you. And again, I'm a firm believer of educating people because some people just don't know the right way to handle any type of mental health, especially if I'm having an episode or that I know my family would be like, well, I don't know what to say sometimes, or am I doing the wrong thing? So that I think comes into play too. So sometimes I think some people it might be meanness, but other people I think it's just that they're joking and they just care, and that's their way of caring, but they don't realize that's what I have to tell them. Again, I'm being serious. You got to give me a little space here.
Right. Right. Exactly. And, you know, I mean, having the ability to really communicate with people in that way. You know, there's a lot of people who, you know, who don't have that support and, you know, and who, for whom, you know, advocacy is dangerous. Right. And
Mhm.
so understanding that in some cases a person can't speak up or they can't, you know, not because they don't want to, not because they're not compelled to, but because the people in their life really don't listen. And calling attention to themselves in that way is not safe, either emotionally or, you know, in some cases physically. But I think that we can make families can make the most impact when they are supportive in the way that you're describing. You know, they do love, they do want to show up, they
Mhm.
do want to, you know, to give the support, but they don't often know how. And so responding in the moment when you say, "Hey, today is not a good day. I need some space." That is not the moment where your family should be saying, "Well, we just need to know how to help you. This please let us." And you're like, "Dude, I just told you I'm not having a good day. Hey, come back to me in 2 or 3 days when I'm, you know, in a better place.
Mhm.
And yes, let's have a meeting and we can talk
Mhm.
about all of these things." But when we this I have this conversation with parents all the time who want to support a child in, you know, in a difficult moment, but they want to try and talk it out when the kid is in the middle of a
Yeah.
tantrum. And it's like that child, that or the individual, you know, who is having a bad day is not going to be in the right frame
Mhm.
of mind. And so if you take that as, you know, an opportunity, as a family member to say, "Well, I tried to talk to you about this, but you just yelled at me." And then you never had the conversation again, or you never broached it again when, you know, the individual was having a better day, when everyone was calm, then you're not really trying to solve the problem. You're trying to make yourself feel better.
Right.
And,
Right.
you know, so these are it's like when a person in a family is struggling, it's, you know, incumbent upon everybody to check their own emotions, right?
Mhm.
Everybody gets to go to therapy. Everybody
Mhm.
gets to figure out what their hangups are, you know, and decide what their motivations are. And I think that I love that you brought that up because a lot of times, you know, even supportive families can, you know, not listen effectively.
Right. Right, exactly, exactly. And again, I think that's the biggest thing is just communicating. And I told you one of the biggest things I too is the fact that people will think you can't be successful. Well, yes, you
Right.
can be.
Mhm.
To me, believe it or not, some days success is just getting out of bed. If I'm struggling,
Yep.
getting out of bed, going down, watching TV is successful for me.
Hallelujah.
Even if I get nothing done that
Mhm.
day, it's still the success again was for me to get out of bed because I fought that part of the depression. I
Mhm.
fought it. Even if I'm staying in my pajamas all day, I still fought to get out of that bed.
Right.
And that's a huge win if
Mhm.
I'm really having a depressive mode.
So talk to me a little bit about, like, you know, I consider that to be self-compassion work, right? I consider that to be, you know, that moment that we let go of, you know, the comparisons or the expectations of my life is supposed to look a certain way and success only looks a certain way and I can only love myself or feel worthy of success, you know, in all of its forms when I do A, B, and C every single day. And if I don't live up to that standard, you know, then I don't deserve happiness and I may as well just go live in a hole somewhere, right? Like,
Right.
so where did you develop that? Or did you just always have it?
The success or just the
The
determination?
the self-compassion, the piece where you go, it's okay for me to just stay in my pajamas today. That's
Oh,
also success.
yes, that developed, believe it or not, probably I would probably say maybe a few years ago.
Yeah.
um,
It's the hardest thing to learn. It's
it
the
really
hardest
is
thing to learn.
because I am such a type A personality.
Mhm.
And I look at you kind of as type A too, Erin. No, so don't take, but I really do because we're just very
Go, go, go.
hard workers, and we just want to, keep getting I have like to-do lists, and I'll be honest with you, sticky notes are my obsessions. And that's a part of, part of my disorder. I did not realize, like I always said, joked around with my counselor, and I'd be like, well, I'm OCD. I said, but I don't have the OCD where I count. And I said, so maybe I'm not OCD. And my counselor's like, that isn't all just OCD. She said, OCD, she says, she told me I had obsessive compulsive personality disorder. And I said, huh? And she said, I need you to look that up before our next session and tell me what you think. Well, I looked that up and spot on.
Right. And you were like, oh, there's a picture of me in the DSM.
Yeah.
That's
yes,
the face right next to the obsessive compulsive personality disorder.
When I had my next session with her, I was like, wow. She said, yes, because again, sticky notes are my friend, because I have all these racing thoughts and I have to repeat them. Like, for example, it could be something as simple as writing, make dentist appointment. Well, when I throw my sticky notes out, there's like 15 of them that says make dentist appointment. It's because it's my racing thoughts. And she said, you become obsessed with it and you're afraid you're going to forget it. And so you just write it over and over. So it took me, I'm telling you, a few years ago to allow myself. And actually, I give this a lot to my mom, and my dad's passed, but when my dad was alive, they really helped me with this, because they've always told me the worst enemy is myself. And especially my mom. My mom would say, Tammy, I need you to be kinder to yourself. I need you to be like, it's okay. Like I would call her, be like, Mom, I didn't do anything all day today. I didn't know what to do because I didn't know where to go first. And she said, first of all, breathe. She said, second of all, it's okay. You can allow yourself to have those days. Be kind to yourself. And it's taken me, like I said, several years ago, I finally realized it's okay. But it was not easy because of I believe because I am so type A and I'm so hard on myself. And even having this managing coping this disorder has not been easy, because I always sometimes feel like, come on, snap out of it. You're stronger than this. And then I'm in the corner crying or calling my mom crying. And I'm like, no, you're stronger. You're stronger. So that's definitely still a work in progress. I'm not going to lie. That's definitely still a work in progress. Like today, I'm going to have self-compassion because I'm exhausted. But I know I have to exercise. So instead of going to the gym, I'm just going to go out for this beautiful sunny day here in Richmond, Virginia, and I'm going to go for a walk. It's cooler. Get that. And then I may just veg all day, and it's going to be okay. I really do not feel guilty about doing that today at all.
Awesome. No, I think that it truly is the hardest part. And it is also the most important part, right? Of like this healing journey, or, whatever we want to call it, is the idea that, the only way that we stop the suffering is when we stop resisting it, right? When we accept, like, this is the reality of my life. Some days I don't have the level of energy or motivation or focus or, that I wish I did. And I could spend my life hating myself, or I could make space for it. I could make the most of the energy when I have it, and I can make space for, those days, or sometimes weeks, sometimes months when I don't have it. Right.
Oh,
and, and not let that define my worthiness. I use that term all the time because it's so tied up in my personal story. Is, I don't have bipolar, but I do have very significant anxiety, depression, PTSD, and ADHD. And so, I've just been really confused and overwhelmed my whole life. Right. And so as a function of that, I know what I want to do. I know what I think I should be doing. I know what I believe I'm supposed to do. And there are times when I can't do those things. And when I stopped hating myself and believing that the only way that I was going to be worthy was if I could show up at 3,000%, 100% of the time. You know, it made a lot more space for, you know, doing the work when I had the energy to do it. It's just really, it's such a hard thing to learn. And it's why, I mean, it's the focus of all of this is like, you
Mhm.
know, if I can step into my story, this Brene Brown, you know, um, oh, that quote that I'm going to butcher now that I hate that I didn't write, but, you know, you can stand inside your story and own it, or you can stand outside of it and hustle for your worthiness. Right? Like that was my whole life, was just hustling. Like if I show up and I smile and I
Yep.
perform real good, then you'll tell me that I'm worthy.
Yes.
And if you tell me that I'm worthy, and you and you and you and you and you and
Mhm.
everyone tells me that I'm worthy, then I won't have to, you know, figure it out for myself, except that
Right.
that is so exhausting because it just means I'm constantly trying to prove my worthiness to other people. Um, and so at some point I had to like say to myself exactly what your mom said to you. Like, it's okay.
Yeah.
You can be this too.
Yeah, you can be kind to yourself. And,
Mhm.
and that, speaking of that too, it's like, that's where all those masks would come in for me. Because, like you said, I really was. I was striving for all those accolades. I
Mhm.
want people to say I'm smart.
Mhm.
I want someone to tell me I'm pretty because
Mhm.
I still struggle. I mean, I'm older and I still truly struggle with self esteem.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, it just, and I'm working on it. I really am. And I have good days and then I have bad days. But like you said, it was exhausting because the masks were constantly coming off for this group. Then I had to go to this group and I had to be this athlete. Then I had to be the funny one. And I was like, all I was looking for was compliments because to me, that's what made me successful.
Right.
And now I realized I was so way off base on that. That is just not. And thanks. Another thing I feel like some people look at success is awards, and that's
Mhm.
not. Don't get me wrong. It's great to have awards. It's great to win things for being acknowledged, but that shouldn't be what defines you as being successful. Like I
Mhm.
said, if I'm having now, let's say I'm having a mania episode and I'm really, really wanting to spend because sometimes that's part of my mania where, like, at one point when I was first diagnosed in my 20s at an early age, I will share a story. I did have a mania episode and I spent $1,000 in like a half hour.
Mhm.
And when I came home that day, because I was living with my parents at the time still, I came home and I was like, had all this stuff, and I don't remember any of it except for the most exciting thing I showed my mom was I had a different color toothbrush for every day of the week.
Right.
And I was so ecstatic about it. And I remember because I was just barely, they were on the border of me being diagnosed with bipolar or at first they thought it was clinical depression because I
Mhm.
wouldn't get out of bed for like 10 days.
Mhm.
And I remember my mom said, what is wrong with you? What are you doing? And I'm and back then I didn't get along with her. And I remember I was that snarky young adult. And I looked at her, I
Right.
said, you're jealous. If you wanted to get your own toothbrush for every day of the week, you could.
Mhm.
And I remember she just snapped that credit card away from me. But so if I'm having a mini episode where I'm like, oh, I want to spend, and I don't do it that day, that's success.
Exactly.
So we got to look at our successes in a different way instead of always looking at getting an award, getting, you understand what I'm saying?
Of course,
Yeah.
absolutely. So I have this little exercise that, you know, started out as part of, you know, my storytelling work and the If You Could See Me project, um and is now something I use regularly in therapy, and that is the tiny wins list. And I encourage people, especially people who have that really intense inner critic, that the people who, feel like if they haven't accomplished something enormous, they haven't accomplished anything at all. That really sort of dichotomous black and white thinking. It's all or nothing. If I didn't do everything, then I did nothing. And so we do the tiny wins list, which is find 5 to 10 things that you did today that you wouldn't normally give yourself credit for. Like, did you get out of bed? Check. Did you take a shower? Check. Did you eat something? Check. Did you take care of your animals? Check. Did you do all of the, like, you don't get to tell me that you did nothing, because that's not true. Maybe you didn't meet your expectations, and we can talk about that. But the truth, the facts bear out that there is a very long list of things that you did today. And we have to be willing to and able to, acknowledge that those things take energy, that those things require a certain amount of focus and belief and hope. Like, to fight the depressive episode, to fight the desire to spend in that moment is enormous. You made a huge decision to not believe that you have to follow those impulses every time they occur. And that is, a function of strength. And that is a function of, of hope and belief that you can have control over this, and that you can, move into a future that is in more control, and all of these things. And it's amazing what happens when a person is encouraged to acknowledge that it doesn't have to be all or nothing.
Right.
And that when you start making that list, you start recognizing more and more and more and more and more and more things. Oh, wait, look at all this. Whoa, I did a ton today, even though I didn't climb Mount Everest or get an Academy Award.
Exactly. And I feel like, too, for me personally, I think the more successes I have, the easier it is for me to be successful. Like in the past, it took me a few years ago, like maybe I think I've been like a year, 2 years tops of self-harm free. So
Amazing. That
was one of probably the hardest tools. I used it as a tool. So I was, not the stereotype, but yes, I was a cutter. And it took me, like I said, it's been like 2 years since the last time I have cut. And I could say, yes, I've cut it as an adult. That was, to me, was a coping mechanism. And I had to work with my therapist and myself, especially because I love therapy. I love therapy. I encourage therapy. I love, I know you're a big fan of NAMI as well. I love, any support group, but someone can only, like, Erin, personally, you can only lead the person to do so much. Then it comes on you. You have to do the work. Your therapist cannot do the work for you. He or she can only give you the tools, but now the work comes on you. So I had to really find hard I threw away my razor blade that I was using. And that was a huge step for me. I threw it away because I would go right away to that, and as well, back in my 20s, I'm a suicide attempt survivor. Okay. And taking those thoughts away is another struggle that I'm sure people that really struggle with any type of mental health, they might have those thoughts of suicide. And that's another one that's extremely tough to fight off. And that's why I love teaching middle school, because I had this talk with my 6th graders the other day. I said to them, I want to know about you. I said, I want you to tell me 3 words to describe yourself. Don't use 3 words that you think that I would be like, oh, she's impressed with, or 3 words that you think your friends think of you. I said, you need to find 3 words that you would use to describe yourself, because you are the one that has to like you. I said, you guys are right smack in this age where I get it. You want all these friends. You want all these likes on social media. I said, but the bottom line is you have to like you. And it is okay for you to be who you are.
Oh, they're so lucky to have you, Tammy.
Thank you. Thank you.
They really are. Nobody ever sent me that message. I'm sure you didn't get that message either in school. You know, they were always, it was a very different message. Show up exactly the right way, or don't show up at all, basically. You know, we don't want your problems here, because that's how, you know, education was and the world was back in the 80s and the 90s when we were coming up, is, you know, like, we don't want to see it. We don't
Mhm.
want to, you know, we don't want to know you're in pain, because that makes us uncomfortable. We don't want to know you're a work in progress. We only want to see you when you're done. And that's why I love having this conversation where, you know, you and I can sit here and we can say we've made a lot of progress in our lives.
Mhm.
Like we have come really far, and we're work in progress. We are still evolving. We are still getting, you know, learning the tools and learning to use them, and reminding ourselves to, you know, remember the things that we forgot along the way and all of that, right? Like it's not, you don't just get to the end and all of a sudden I'm healed and it's gone and I'll never have another one of those thoughts. Like, it is a process, and it is part of our experience. It doesn't define our entire lives, but it is a part of our experience. Uh and knowing that, I think, is so hopeful. Like, there are people who are going to hear you talk about how far you have come, and the fact that, you know, there are still times where things are a struggle, that make it feel like they're not alone, make it feel like they don't, you know, oh, I'm not expected to, like, graduate from, you know, my bipolar diagnosis. Like I just
Yeah.
am expected to manage it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's forever, but it's, you know, it's a healing that is, you know, always evolving,
And I
because
think
we're
that was
always evolving.
right. And I think that for me personally, that was the key for my recovery, was to accept.
Yes.
I hospitalized twice. It was my second hospitalization that the light bulb finally clicked on. And that was when I was older, and it was a really bad mania episode. For 5 days straight, I didn't sleep, not even 1 hour. And it was horrendous. I missed Christmas with my family that year. But the thing was, that's when it set in. And it was who I can't remember. I'm a very religious person, and I don't like to throw religion on people because that can be a sensitive topic. But I'm not going to lie, I believe this was an angel sent to me, because this person sat down and said, listen, we have two choices here. We keep going down the road you're going, and I hate to say it, I will see you back. Or let's take this road and take this road of recovery, and let's do something with it, make that positive impact on folks. And that's when it clicked. So I had to, like you said, I still have to make changes. I still continue to make changes, but
Yeah.
the big changes I made have made this recovery so much easier for me. I really truly feel like I don't have as many bipolar swings as I used to, because I am in recovery. And the biggest part of recovery for me was acceptance. And
Yes.
then after I accepted it, that's when I made the little changes, such as I don't drink alcohol anymore. You would think, being a PE and health teacher, I knew alcohol was a depressant, and then you drink on top of it. Come on, it's not a good combination. But I also used alcohol as a coping tool for me, because it allowed me to be a different person. So it allowed me to escape from the issues that I didn't want to deal with. So to me, recovery was, acceptance came number one, and then the recovery has come since then. And now it's making, if I do have a bad day, they don't last as long for me, because again, I have the tools, and I've done the acceptance part and the recovery to make sure I stay as stable and as I can. And that's, again, it's a work in progress, like you said. That's another myth I like people to understand, is just because I'm diagnosed doesn't mean I'm never going to have these swings again, because I do. They're just not as often anymore, which is so wonderful.
Right. Right. Well, and that's the thing, is that, you know, the diagnosis and the proper treatment and the commitment, like, these are all the sort of legs of the stool, right? And so it's not just you get a diagnosis and all of a sudden everything gets better. Like it still is a process, and you have to work at it, like anything else. And I think that accepting that is, you speak so much truth, and I like want to focus on that, because acceptance is literally the biggest part.
Mm-hmm.
It just is. I mean, whether, and they talk about it a lot in AA, but I don't think that outside of AA we have like this collective mental health language. We don't have it in the same way that they have it in 12-step programs, which, good, bad, and different, it works for a lot of people, but it's a shared language. And part of that is acceptance. Part of that is, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. Right. And so, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I grew up with a step parent who was in recovery, and I learned that phrase when I was 11 years old. And it has been incredibly beneficial to me in my life. The understanding that, like, the more you fight it, the more you resist it, the more you just try to pretend like it's not there, you're not actually doing what needs to be done to make it better.
Mm-hmm.
And the acceptance piece is literally life. It shifts everything. It shifts the whole perspective. And it is literally the hardest thing, like acceptance and self-compassion. I think they're two sides of the same coin, and they are so difficult because self-compassion requires acceptance.
Right.
Acceptance requires self-compassion.
Yeah.
And so you have to have both. But I also think, like everything else we've been talking about, it is, it evolves over time.
Yes.
It's interesting. We're close in age. And I am perimenopausal, have been for several years. And so this moment in my life as a woman is interesting, because I'm evolving in a completely different way now. And, it affects my mental health, and it affects my body image, and it affects,
Mm-hmm.
so it's like all of those things that you work so hard to learn to accept and deal with, and, get to a point where you're like, oh, I am a woman of, of a certain age. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait, hold on. We're just going to throw a big old wrench in,
Yeah.
in the system and push you. You just got here. You just got comfortable with yourself. Now let's push you off the cliff.
Yeah.
Okay, here you go, lady. Have fun and
enjoy
the new phase.
Oh, I agree. It's, and I, one thing my parents have always said, they're so proud of me, is I have not fallen into the norm of life, in the sense that I'm still single. Mm-hmm. And trust me, I don't want to be single, but I'm not willing to just settle either. I'm looking for a certain guy that has to meet my criteria. And I mean, I could have been married several years ago, and I'll be honest with you, he was going to ask me to marry him, but what I didn't like was the fact that he wanted me to move, but I wasn't ready to move yet, because I wanted to finish my master's degree, because that was a goal I had set for myself. And back then I was having extreme highs and lows. Mm-hmm. And that's where I'm so proud of myself, because during that storm, I was able to graduate with my master's. I fought all through that. But he could not accept that. And he was like, no, I need you to move. And I said, no, I'm getting this master's. So if you can't wait, then we're done. And so we were done. I have not fallen into the norm of having kids. I don't have any children. And I'm okay with that, because I choose now, if God brings somebody into my life that has kids, I'm not going to say no to that person. But what I mean is, personally, I'm okay with, I personally feel like handling my bipolar is enough for me, and I look at my students always, and I tell them every day, and they just laugh, because I'll share with them. I'm like, I don't have children, and I'm okay with that. I said, because you're my children. But one thing I do say to them every class, every day they leave, even if, like, like, I'll give you an example. 8th grade, who's supposed to be the most mature, sometimes they have their moments. I had to raise my voice at them yesterday, and they were like, but they know how I am. They know I'm very structured, but every time they leave class, no matter if they drive me crazy that day or not, the last words they hear out of my mouth is, I always tell each class I love them. And I have not had a complaint. And if I do, then I don't care, because sometimes they don't hear that throughout the day.
That's right.
You know, we always talk about as teachers, these kids do come in just as us adults, but these kids come in with different backpacks. We don't know what's inside that backpack.
That's right.
So if that kid is having a rough day and me saying, and I will say, all right, love you guys, have a great day. If that's what makes that child's day, and I truly do love them. They become my children from now until June. I just have the benefits of, they're not staying overnight or anything. And I can send them on their way after like 90 minutes.
Right.
But I love them, and so, that's where I agree with what you're saying. I mean, I haven't fallen, I know we're in this close to the same age. I just have not fallen to that norm of what society expects to be. I have finally stand my ground and be like, no, I am Tammy, and you take me or don't. It's your choice at this point,
Right. Absolutely. Well, I mean, what an incredible role model you are for these kids, that, you said you stand so firmly in your identity and in your, who you are and what you are about. And I think so often we don't model that. We didn't have, often have it modeled for us, but these kids are incredibly fortunate to have a teacher who is so firmly rooted in their own, what you believe in and who you are. And I love that you tell them that you love them. That's, they should feel loved by their teachers. And if that's weird, then, that's a part of a larger conversation about how broken, systems are, that, it's perfectly normal for children to feel, judged and shamed and ridiculed by teachers. And nobody says anything about that. But, a teacher who says, hey, I love you, is weird or wrong, which it doesn't sound like anybody is saying that to you, but I hope they don't.
Right.
So last like 5 or so minutes, you were recently published in an amazing book, Emotionally Naked, by our wonderful friend and advocate, Ann Moss Rogers. So tell us about that, and tell us where people can find the book.
Well, Ann Moss Rogers, as you know, just like you two, and I'm not saying this because I'm talking to you, but I've always looked up to you and her. So no, I really have. You two have really become my role models. And I'm just so fortunate to have both of you. Like, I'm so glad we met. I really am. But her book can be found in Barnes and Nobles, and I'm pretty sure on Amazon. But if people just go to Emotionally Naked, they'll be able to find the book there. But what happened was, and I remember you couldn't make it that day. You had a conflict in your schedule. So I wanted to get the mental health lesson out to these students because, again, these kids want to talk. I'm telling you, they want to, but there is no platform for them. And it makes me so angry sometimes, because why can't they talk about this? That's ridiculous. Yep. And so I said, I'm going to open the floodgates. We're going to see what happens. So I went to my fabulous ILC, and my vision was for the kids to work together, create a podcast. I gave them a list of mental health conditions that they could choose from. And what they did was they got in groups and they chose a mental health condition. Then they had to research it. There was like 10 questions they had to answer because I wanted them to know the symptoms. I wanted to know was there treatments. I wanted them to know what were some myths about that mental health condition. Then I took it a step further. And at first I thought, well, let's make these cute little Virginia license plates, because you know how people have personalized license plate. I said, and I explained to the kids what the word stigma was. A lot of them knew what it was, and I said we have to fight the word stigma because mental health always has a negative stigma with it, and it shouldn't, because we should be classified just as somebody has diabetes. You know, somebody that I have high cholesterol, so you're going to stigmatize me? Come on. So she was the one who came up with the great idea of these 3D license plates. And so they put them in this little Tinkercad, it's called, and we have a 3D printer. And what the students did, for like example, let's say it was this one group of, it was like depression. So they made a license plate, and it was a legit measured Virginia license plate. So if they wanted this license plate later on, they could actually get it made because it was the right size and everything. So there was one group that did ADHD awareness, and what did they put? I think the license plate said calm. One group had like understanding. One group did depression, and they put depression, but they put a smile face. One group did like mental health awareness, and they said kindness. So I told them the license plate had to be a positive way of looking at that mental health condition. And as you hear me saying, Erin, I always say mental health condition now. I don't like the word illness anymore because that means you're sick. So if you put mental health with that, then that means you're telling me I'm sick in the brain, and I'm not. My brain just is chemically maybe a little bit more different than anybody else's sometimes. So that's why I say mental health conditions. But yes, so then Ann came in that day. Dr. Mark Richardson, who's no longer the NAMI for Central Virginia, executive director, he came in, and I know you had a conflict that day, but I am going to do it this year. So I would like to invite you this year if you'd be willing. Oh no, you're in a totally different state. You left us. I forgot.
I mean, I can come by, digital or virtually.
Yes, let's do that. We'll talk about that. Yes.
Do that,
but they came in, but unfortunately COVID hit. But the rationale was when they made their podcast, we put a QR code. And the idea was for each grade level, 6th, 7th, and 8th, to have their own hallway of mental health awareness. So their license plate was going to be displayed. Then underneath that license plate was going to be their QR code for their podcast. So then this way, kids could go with their phones and listen to the podcast if they want. So I do have the license plates with me still, and I'm still planning on doing it again this year. But the point was the kids ate it up. Like I had this one girl who was very quiet, and she just told the whole class that she struggles with depression. Now, because we're all virtual, we went half virtual last year, as you know, and hybrid, we couldn't do it, but we did do mental health. And the grade that talked the most, and I had to actually stop them because time was running out, was 8th grade.
Yeah.
I had a girl tell the whole class about her eating disorder. I had a student in that class, his brother, unfortunately died by suicide. And he told the whole class, these kids want to talk. And as teachers, especially I feel it is in our curriculum finally. I don't know what took Virginia so long to get in the curriculum, but it did. I just wish there would be more time to allow these kids to talk, because some of them, like I said, they want to share their stories. So it was fantastic. So those lessons are in the book, and I can, like Ann, it was just so awesome that she was willing to put that in there. So.
Yeah, well, she is a remarkable advocate and, connector of people and, developer of resources. And we're just incredibly fortunate to have her in our orbit. She is definitely a role model for me as well. I am honored to be even, placed in her orbit because
exactly.
she's really
speaking
remarkable.
Of not to cut you off, speaking of strength and hope, like as you know, I have my tattoo. So we see, well, I don't know how you can see it, but that's strength. And then you're saying hope, and there's my trying to figure that out. Hope. But then I did get the semicolon.
Oh.
Because being a
Yeah.
survivor. And
Uh-huh.
then I don't know if you saw the latest one, but
No.
there's the green one for mental health, and it says
Awesome.
not all wounds are visible. Not all wounds are visible. Mental health awareness. And the
Hmm.
kids were asking me about that the other day, ironically. They're like, what do those tattoos represent? And I said, it represents all about mental health. I said, I'm a big advocate about writing about it. And again, they want to talk. They
Yep.
really do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the bottom line with this conversation, I wanted people to understand is that you can be successful, like we said, but success is different, looks different for every person.
That's right.
So it's, again, please don't get caught up on these awards and stuff. If you get out of bed and you're struggling with depression, you were successful.
That's right. Let's stop comparing ourselves to one another or to these, external representations
Yes.
of what success looks like, and let's start living in a way that is authentic to ourselves. And, what do you need and how do you get it? Tammy, I mean, I couldn't have planned the end any better. You just are so savvy and so amazing. And I'm just always so honored to share space with you. You are a remarkable human. The work you do is magnificent. Thank you
Thank you.
so much for being here with us today. And, I just can only imagine what you will continue to accomplish.
Thank you.
All right, y'all, we will see you next week. Let me look at my list so that I know who is joining us next week. Is a return of our wonderful friend Tara Colton to talk about mental health and the church. So that'll be an interesting and fruitful conversation, I can only imagine, as they all are. Y'all, please download, subscribe, like, rate, review, find us on Apple and all the places where you get your podcasts. The more you like us, the more you share us, the more people will be able to find us, and then we'll be able to get this amazing message out into the world and defeat stigma, as Tammy was talking about, create a world in which all stories are valuable and honored, and that everyone feels seen and appreciated, heard, and has the space to step fully into their identity, as amazing Tammy has done. Thank you all so much for joining us. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.